In just 45 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved talk show hosts transformed from charming entertainer to aggressive bully, sparking a fiery confrontation that ended with comedy legend Ricky Gervais storming off the set in disgust. What began as light conversation quickly descended into a heated battle of egos, insults, and shocking accusations that left the studio audience gasping in disbelief. Before we dive into this explosive story, make sure you subscribe to the channel for daily videos exposing Hollywood's darkest scandals. Hit that notification bell so you never miss the drama. Last night's episode of The Graham Norton Show was supposed to showcase Ricky Gervais promoting his latest stand-up special. The comedian walked onto the famous red couch with his trademark grin, waving to the cheering audience as Graham greeted him with his usual warmth. The studio lights were bright, the audience was excited, and everything seemed perfectly normal for the first few minutes. Graham started with simple questions about Ricky's tour and his experiences performing around the world. Ricky answered with his typical wit, making jokes about travel disasters and difficult audiences. The crowd laughed along, and it seemed like another entertaining Friday night chat. But anyone paying close attention could sense something brewing beneath the surface. Graham's smile seemed slightly forced, and his questions carried an edge that wasn't normally there. "So, Ricky," Graham said, leaning back in his purple chair, "you've built quite the career on being controversial, haven't you? Always pushing buttons, always trying to shock people." Ricky chuckled and nodded. "Well, I think comedy should challenge people sometimes. Make them think about things differently. That's kind of the point, isn't it?" Graham's expression shifted slightly. "But where's the line, do you think? When does being edgy just become being mean for the sake of it?" The question hung in the air for a moment. The audience went quiet, sensing the tension. Ricky's smile faded just a fraction. "I don't think I'm mean," Ricky replied carefully. "I think I'm honest. There's a difference between being cruel and pointing out uncomfortable truths." "Is there, though?" Graham pressed, his voice taking on a sharper tone. "Because some people would argue that your recent material has crossed from clever satire into just punching down at vulnerable groups." Ricky sat up straighter on the couch. "Punching down? I've never punched down in my life. I go after everyone equally. That's equality, Graham. Real equality." Graham let out a dismissive laugh that made several audience members shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Oh, come on, Ricky. You can't seriously believe that. When you're a wealthy, successful man making jokes about marginalized communities, that's the definition of punching down." "Marginalized communities?" Ricky repeated, his voice rising slightly. "I make jokes about everyone. I make jokes about myself, about other comedians, about politicians, about celebrities. Nobody's off limits. That's my whole philosophy." "Yes, and that philosophy has gotten quite tired, hasn't it?" Graham shot back, his friendly demeanor completely gone now. "It's 2025, Ricky. The world has moved on from your style of shock value comedy. Maybe it's time you evolved with it." The audience gasped audibly. This was unprecedented. Graham Norton never attacked his guests like this. His show was known for being fun, light-hearted, and celebratory. But here he was, openly criticizing one of Britain's most successful comedians on live television. Ricky's jaw tightened. "Evolved? You mean become bland and inoffensive? Just say nice things that everyone agrees with so nobody ever feels uncomfortable? That's not comedy, Graham. That's just nothing." "No, I mean show some basic respect and empathy," Graham snapped. "But I suppose that's too much to ask from someone whose entire brand is built on not caring what anyone thinks." "You're damn right. I don't care what everyone thinks," Ricky fired back. "That's why I'm successful. That's why people come to my shows. Because I say what others are too scared to say." Graham leaned forward aggressively. "Or maybe they come because they share your outdated views, and you make them feel justified in their prejudices." That was the moment everything exploded. Ricky stood up from the couch, his face flushed with anger. "Prejudices? Are you calling me a bigot, Graham? On your own show? What the hell is wrong with you?" The studio fell completely silent. Even the cameras seemed to freeze. This wasn't playful banter anymore. This was a genuine fight breaking out in front of millions of viewers. Graham stood up as well, matching Ricky's energy. "If the shoe fits, Ricky, I'm tired of sitting here and platforming people who use comedy as an excuse to spread harmful ideas. Harmful ideas? Ricky shouted, throwing his hands up. I tell jokes. I make people laugh. That's literally my job. When did you become the morality police, Graham? When did this show turn into a bloody tribunal? When people like you started thinking you could say whatever you want without consequences. Graham shot back, his voice echoing through the studio. You hide behind freedom of speech and artistic expression, but really you're just a middle-aged man desperate to stay relevant by being provocative. The audience didn't know whether to gasp or applaud. Some people sat frozen in shock, while others whispered nervously to their neighbors. The energy in the room had gone from entertaining to genuinely uncomfortable. Ricky pointed his finger at Graham. You know what? This is pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. You invite me on your show just to ambush me? To lecture me about my career? Who the hell do you think you are? I think I'm someone with a conscience, Graham retorted. Unlike you, apparently, I'm someone who realizes that words have power and impact. Oh, spare me the sanctimonious bullshit, Ricky snapped. You've made plenty of edgy jokes in your time, Graham. Don't act like you're some saint now because it's fashionable to attack comedians who don't toe the line. Graham's face turned red. My jokes were never mean-spirited. They were never designed to hurt people who were already struggling. There's a difference between being funny and being a bully, and you've crossed that line repeatedly. I've never bullied anyone in my life, Ricky shouted, his voice cracking with emotion. I make jokes about ideas, about behavior, about society. If you can't separate that from attacking individuals, then maybe you're the one who doesn't understand comedy. The tension had reached its breaking point. Graham moved closer to Ricky, invading his personal space in a way that made the audience audibly uncomfortable. Maybe I don't understand your version of comedy, Graham said coldly, because your version seems to involve making millions of pounds while making other people feel small and attacked. Ricky laughed bitterly. This is unbelievable. You know what your problem is, Graham? You've been doing this cozy little chat show for so long that you've forgotten what real comedy is. You just sit here in your safe little bubble, asking celebrities about their pets and their holiday homes, never challenging anything, never taking any risks. At least I'm not causing genuine harm, Graham countered. At least I'm not contributing to a culture that makes vulnerable people feel even more isolated and attacked. Vulnerable people? Ricky's voice was dripping with frustration now. Do you think vulnerable people are sitting around crying over my jokes? They've got real problems to worry about, real discrimination to fight against. My comedy isn't the enemy here, but you're too blind to see that. Graham shook his head dismissively. You're delusional if you think your words don't have consequences. Absolutely delusional. That word hung in the air like a bomb. Calling someone delusional on live television was crossing a serious line, and everyone in the studio knew it. Ricky's expression darkened. His hands balled into fists at his sides, though not in a threatening way, more out of sheer frustration and disbelief at what was happening. Delusional, Ricky repeated slowly. You just called me delusional on your show, in front of all these people, on live television. Graham didn't back down. Yes, I did, because that's what you are if you genuinely believe your comedy doesn't hurt anyone. The conversation had spiraled completely out of control. What started as a subtle dig had become a full-blown character assassination. The audience sat in stunned silence, unsure whether this was somehow planned or if they were witnessing a genuine meltdown. Ricky took a deep breath, clearly trying to compose himself. You know what, Graham? I came here tonight thinking we'd have a nice chat, maybe share some laughs, promote my special. But instead, you decided to use your platform to attack me personally, to question my character, to call me names. I'm just saying what needs to be said, Graham insisted, his voice not wavering. Someone has to hold you accountable. Accountable? Ricky's laugh was hollow. You're not some journalist doing an investigation, mate. You're a talk show host. Your job is to entertain people, not prosecute them. Maybe my job has evolved, Graham said smugly. Maybe I've realized I have a responsibility to use my platform for more than just fluff pieces and celebrity gossip. Ricky stared at him for a long moment, and you could see the wheels turning in his head. He was deciding whether to keep fighting or to walk away. The entire studio held its breath. You want to know what I think? Ricky finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. I think you're jealous. I think you're sitting here in your comfortable hosting job, reading other people's funny stories and playing other people's clips, and you're jealous that some of us actually create original content, that some of us take risks and put ourselves out there. Graham's eyes flashed with anger. Jealous? Of you? Don't flatter yourself, Ricky. I'm perfectly happy with my career. Thank you very much. Are you, though? Ricky pressed. Because it seems like you're pretty bitter about something. Why else would you invite a guest on your show just to tear them apart? That's not normal behavior, Graham. That's someone with an axe to grind. The accusation clearly hit a nerve. Graham's face contorted with rage, and he stepped even closer to Ricky. How dare you? Graham hissed. How dare you come on my show and analyze me? You don't know anything about me or my motivations. I know enough, Ricky shot back. I know you're using me as a punching bag to make yourself look good, to show everyone how enlightened and progressive you are. It's pathetic. Graham's voice rose to a shout. Get out! Get off my show! The audience gasped collectively. This was it. The moment everyone would be talking about tomorrow. Graham Norton was actually kicking a guest off his show in the middle of a live broadcast. But Ricky didn't move. He stood his ground, staring Graham down. Oh, you want me to leave? Ricky said, his voice steady despite the chaos. That's your solution? Just kick me out rather than have an actual conversation? There's no conversation to be had with someone like you, Graham spat. You're impossible. You're arrogant. And you're a relic of a comedy era that's thankfully dying out. Someone like me, Ricky repeated, shaking his head in disbelief. Listen to yourself, Graham. You sound like a cult member. Anyone who doesn't agree with your worldview is the enemy. That's not progressive. That's authoritarian. I said get out, Graham shouted again, pointing toward the exit. I don't want you on my show anymore. Ricky held up his hands. Fine. Absolutely fine. I'd rather be anywhere else right now anyway. This has been one of the most bizarre experiences of my career. He started walking toward the edge of the stage, but then turned back for one final comment. You know what's sad, Graham? I used to respect you. I used to think you were one of the good ones in this business. Someone who celebrated talent and brought joy to people's Friday nights. But you've become exactly what you claim to hate. Someone who judges others, who attacks people for not conforming, who thinks they're morally superior. It's disappointing. Graham's face was purple with rage now. Oh, spare me your disappointment. I don't need validation from you. Just leave. Get out of my studio. Your studio? Ricky laughed bitterly. Right. Because you own the place. You're the king here, aren't you? You get to decide who's worthy of being on your precious show. Well, congratulations, Your Majesty. You've just shown everyone watching what kind of person you really are. The audience was completely divided now. Some people were nodding in agreement with Ricky, while others looked supportive of Graham. The situation had become so toxic that nobody really knew who to side with anymore. Graham ignored Ricky's words and turned to address the camera directly, as if Ricky had already left. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for what you've just witnessed, Graham said, his voice shaking slightly. This is not how we normally conduct ourselves on this show, but I will not sit here and provide a platform for views that I find harmful and regressive. Ricky, still standing near the edge of the stage, let out a loud, incredulous laugh. Harmful and regressive, he repeated mockingly. Those are just buzzwords, Graham. Empty words that people use when they can't actually articulate what they disagree with. You haven't made a single coherent argument tonight. You've just attacked me personally and acted like that makes you righteous. Graham whirled around. You're still here? I told you to leave. I'm going, Ricky said, holding up his hands again. But I want everyone watching to understand what just happened here. I came on this show as a guest. I was invited, and instead of having a normal conversation, I was ambushed by a host who decided to use me as a prop in his own moral crusade. That's not journalism. That's not even entertainment. It's just sad. What's sad is your refusal to take any responsibility for your impact, Graham countered, his voice breaking slightly. What's sad is that you can't even acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, some of your material has hurt people. Ricky sighed, and for a moment, his anger seemed to fade into something closer to disappointment. Graham, all comedy has the potential to offend someone. That's the nature of the art form. If we only told jokes that everyone found acceptable, there would be no comedy left. Just safe, boring observations that don't challenge anything or make anyone think. There's a difference between challenging people and attacking them, Graham insisted, though his voice had lost some of its earlier venom. Why can't you understand that? Because I don't accept your premise, Ricky replied simply. I don't believe I attack people. I mock ideas. I satirize behavior. I highlight absurdities. If you choose to take that personally, that's your interpretation. Not my intention. Graham threw his hands up in exasperation. And that's exactly the problem. You hide behind intention as if it absolves you of all responsibility. But impact matters, Ricky. Impact matters more than intention. Does it though? Ricky challenged. Because by that logic, anything that hurts anyone's feelings should be banned. Any art that makes someone uncomfortable should be censored. That's not a world I want to live in. The two men stood facing each other, neither willing to back down. The audience watched in fascination, witnessing a genuine ideological battle playing out in real time. Graham's voice dropped to a more controlled level, but the anger was still there beneath the surface. This isn't about censorship, and you know it. This is about basic human decency, about treating people with respect, about recognizing that words have power. I recognize that words have power, Ricky said firmly. That's exactly why I use them so carefully in my work. Every joke is crafted, every bit is thought through. I'm not just randomly saying offensive things for shock value. There's always a point, always a target, always a reason. And who decides what that reason is? Graham asked. You? Just you? You get to be judge and jury on what's acceptable comedy? Ricky smiled grimly. No, Graham. The audience decides. If people don't like my comedy, they don't have to watch it. They don't have to buy tickets to my shows. They have complete freedom to engage with my work or ignore it. But you, apparently, have decided that you get to make that choice for them. You've decided that your moral standards should dictate what everyone else gets to see and hear. Graham's face flushed again. That's not what I'm doing. I'm using my platform to take a stand against comedy that I believe causes genuine harm. By attacking me on your show, Ricky said flatly. By ambushing a guest and creating a hostile environment. Yeah, you're really taking the moral high ground there, mate. The sarcasm in Ricky's voice was palpable, and it clearly struck a nerve with Graham. You know what? Graham said, his voice rising again. I don't have to justify myself to you. This is my show, my studio, my rules, and I've decided that I don't want to give you a platform anymore. So for the last time, get the hell out. Ricky nodded slowly. There it is. The truth finally comes out. This isn't about morality or protecting people. It's about control. It's about you wanting to decide who gets a voice and who doesn't. That's authoritarianism dressed up as progressivism, and it's dangerous. Oh, please, Graham scoffed. Asking you to leave my show isn't authoritarianism. It's called having standards. Standards, Ricky repeated with a bitter laugh. Right. Well, your standards seem to involve inviting guests on under false pretenses and then verbally assaulting them. So forgive me if I don't find your moral authority particularly compelling. The two men were now locked in a staring contest, neither willing to be the first to break eye contact. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Finally, Ricky shook his head and started walking away again. This has been enlightening, Graham. Really enlightening. I came here thinking we were friends, or at least friendly colleagues, but I guess I was wrong. You've shown your true colors tonight, and they're not as bright as you think they are. Graham called after him, his voice dripping with contempt. My true colors are standing up for what's right, something you've never done. Ricky stopped and turned back one more time. Standing up for what's right, he said quietly. Is that what you think this is? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a lot more like bullying. Like using your position of power to tear down someone you disagree with. But hey, as long as you can sleep at night thinking you're one of the good guys, right? I am one of the good guys, Graham shouted, losing his composure completely now. I'm trying to make the world better. What are you doing besides making money off other people's pain? That accusation hung in the air like poison. The suggestion that Ricky profited from suffering was perhaps the lowest blow Graham had thrown all night. Ricky's face went completely still. When he spoke, His voice was ice cold. "You have no idea what you're talking about. No idea whatsoever. My comedy comes from observation, from experience, from years of studying human nature and society. But you've reduced it to making money off pain because that fits your narrative. That makes me the villain in your little morality play. If the shoe fits," Graham muttered, echoing his earlier comment. Ricky took a deep breath, visibly trying to control his temper. "You know what, Graham? I feel sorry for you. I really do. Because you've bought into this ideology so completely that you can't even see how toxic you've become. You think you're fighting the good fight, but really, you're just another bully with a microphone." Graham's laugh was harsh and mocking. "I'm the bully? That's rich coming from you. Absolutely rich." "Yeah, you are," Ricky said firmly. "You invited me here under the pretense of a normal interview. Then you ambushed me with personal attacks. You've called me delusional, questioned my character, suggested I'm a bigot, and accused me of profiting from pain. All on live television. All while I'm supposed to just sit there and take it. If that's not bullying, I don't know what is." The audience murmured in agreement, and you could tell some of them were starting to turn against Graham. His behavior had been so aggressive, so out of character for his normally jovial persona, that people were genuinely shocked. Graham seemed to sense this shift in the room. His expression wavered for just a moment, as if he was reconsidering his approach. But then his jaw set again, and the hostility returned. "You can paint yourself as the victim all you want, Ricky. But we both know the truth. We both know that you've built a career on being provocative and controversial, and now you're upset that someone finally called you out on it." "Called me out?" Ricky laughed in disbelief. "Is that what you think this is? Calling me out? Graham, you haven't made a single substantive criticism of my work. You've just thrown around vague accusations and personal insults. That's not calling someone out. That's just having a tantrum." The word tantrum clearly struck a nerve. Graham's face went from red to almost purple. "How dare you?" he breathed. "How dare you diminish what I'm trying to do here?" "What are you trying to do?" Ricky demanded. "Seriously, what is your goal here? Because from my perspective, all you've accomplished is making yourself look petty and vindictive. You've embarrassed yourself. You've embarrassed your show. And you've embarrassed everyone who works here." Graham looked like he'd been slapped. For a moment, he seemed genuinely wounded by Ricky's words. But then the anger came rushing back. "Get out," he said quietly, dangerously. "Get out right now before I have security remove you." Ricky raised his eyebrows. "Security? Really? You're going to have me physically removed from the building? Jesus Christ, Graham. Listen to yourself." "I'm completely serious," Graham said, reaching for something in his pocket. Presumably his phone to call security. "You have 10 seconds to leave voluntarily, or I'm making a call." The audience gasped again. This situation had escalated beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Graham Norton, beloved talk show host, was threatening to have Ricky Gervais forcibly removed from the studio. Ricky held up his hands in a gesture of surrender, but his expression was one of complete disgust. "Unbelievable," he said. "Absolutely unbelievable. You've completely lost your mind, Graham. But fine. I'm leaving. I wouldn't stay here another second anyway." He turned and walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the silent studio. But before he reached the door, he stopped one final time. "One more thing," Ricky said, not even looking back at Graham. "Everyone watching this, everyone in this audience, just witnessed what happens when someone trades their integrity for social approval. Graham used to be funny, used to be genuine, used to actually care about entertainment. But somewhere along the way, he decided that being seen as morally righteous was more important than being authentic. And this is the result. A bitter, angry man attacking people who don't conform to his worldview. Take note, because this is what ideological possession looks like." With that, Ricky Gervais walked out of the studio, leaving Graham Norton standing alone on the stage, breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. The audience sat in stunned silence, nobody quite sure how to react to what they'd just witnessed. Graham slowly turned back to face the camera, his carefully constructed TV persona completely shattered. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. The confusion and shock on the faces of the crew members was visible even from the audience. For several long seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The show that was supposed to be light entertainment had turned into something dark and uncomfortable, and everyone in that studio knew they'd just witnessed something that would be talked about for years to come. Finally, Ricky reached the exit door. He paused with his hand on the handle, and for just a brief moment, he glanced back at Graham one last time. The look on his face wasn't anger anymore, it was disappointment. Pure, profound disappointment. Then he pushed through the door and was gone, leaving behind an atmosphere so tense and uncomfortable that even the experienced camera operators didn't know where to point their lenses. Graham Norton stood frozen on his stage, the weight of what had just happened slowly dawning on him as the reality of the situation crashed down around him.